You've been showing up for everyone. Always. But when was the last time someone asked if you were okay without needing something in return? There's a particular exhaustion that lives in the bones of those who give too much. It's not the kind of tiredness that sleep can cure. It's the weariness of a soul that has become everyone's refuge, everyone's answer, everyone's emotional emergency room. You've become the person they call when their world is falling apart. Yet when your own foundation cracks, the silence is deafening. You are the keeper of secrets, the solver of problems, the one who drops everything when they text, when they call, when they need. You've built your identity on being indispensable, on being the reliable one, the understanding one, the one who never says no. But somewhere in this endless giving, you've forgotten the sound of your own voice asking for help. The phone buzzes, and your heart sinks just a little. Another crisis. Another person who needs you to hold their emotional world together while yours quietly crumbles in the background. You answer anyway, because this is who you are, or you think you need to be. But what if I told you that your availability has become a prison? That your constant presence in others' lives has created an invisible cage around your own? The very thing you thought made you valuable, being always there, always ready, always willing, has slowly eroded the boundaries between where they end and you begin. Tonight, as you sit in the quiet aftermath of another day spent fixing everyone else's problems, I want you to feel something revolutionary stirring within you. It's the recognition that your exhaustion is not weakness, it's wisdom. Your body, your spirit, is trying to tell you something profound. You were never meant to be everyone's everything. The people in your life have learned to lean on you in ways that feel like love, but taste like dependency. They've become addicted to your reactions, your comfort, your endless capacity to absorb their pain and transform it into something manageable. But here's the truth that cuts deep. Much of what you've mistaken for love is actually emotional convenience. Carl Jung understood this when he wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." The people who drain you, who demand your constant availability, are reflecting back something you haven't yet recognized, your own desperate need to be needed. You see, real love doesn't require you to be perpetually available. Real love doesn't demand that you sacrifice your peace for someone else's comfort. But the relationships you've built, many of them, are constructed on a foundation of your reliability, not your inherent worth. They love what you do for them, not who you are without the doing. Think about it. How many of these people check on you when you're not in crisis-solving mode? How many reach out just to share joy, not just to dump pain? How many would still be in your life if you suddenly became unavailable, if you stopped being their emotional vending machine? This isn't cynicism speaking, it's clarity. Jung called this the dance of personas, the masks we wear to be acceptable to others. You've been wearing the mask of perpetual availability for so long that you've forgotten what your face looks like underneath it. Others have fallen in love with your mask, not your authentic self. The uncomfortable truth is that emotional dependency masquerades as connection. They need you to react to their drama because your reaction validates their experience. They need you to fix their problems because your solutions make them feel worthy of care. They need you to be always there because your presence fills the void they refuse to face within themselves. But dependency is not love. Convenience is not connection. And your exhaustion is your soul's way of begging you to remember the difference. There's a profound power in stepping back that most people will never understand. Not the power of revenge or punishment, but the power of reclaiming your psychic energy, what Jung called the life force that gets dispersed when we react to every emotional demand placed upon us. When you begin to withdraw your automatic availability, something magnificent happens. You discover who you are when you're not busy being who everyone else needs you to be. This withdrawal isn't coldness, it's consciousness. It's the deliberate choice to stop allowing your emotional state to be dictated by the chaos of others. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this deeply when he wrote, "He who cannot obey himself will be commanded." For years, you've been commanded by the needs, wants, and emotional states of others. Every time someone was upset, you became upset. Every time someone needed fixing, you dropped everything to become their solution. You've been living as an extension of other people's emotional experiences, rather than the author of your own. But withdrawal conscious, intentional withdrawal breaks this cycle. When you stop immediately responding to every emotional ping, when you create space between their crisis and your reaction, you're not being cruel. You're practicing what the ancients called temperance, the mastery over impulse that creates true freedom. Your nervous system has been hijacked by the constant state of alert that comes from being everyone's emotional first responder. The withdrawal isn't just psychological, it's physiological. Your body needs to remember what it feels like to exist, without the constant surge of cortisol that comes from absorbing everyone else's stress. This is where the magic begins to happen. In the space between stimulus and response, between their need and your automatic reaction, you discover choice. You discover that you are not required to catch every emotional ball thrown your way. You can let some of them drop. You can watch them bounce and roll away without feeling responsible for cleaning up the mess. The withdrawal creates mystery, and mystery creates respect. People begin to wonder about your inner world instead of assuming they have unlimited access to it. They start to value your presence because it's no longer guaranteed, no longer taken for granted. Silence is the most underestimated force in human relationships. Not the cold silence of punishment, but the warm silence of self-possession. When you stop explaining yourself, stop justifying your boundaries, stop defending your right to have needs, you reclaim something sacred. Most people fear your silence because it strips away their ability to control you through emotional manipulation. Your words, your explanations, your justifications, these were the handles they used to grip your emotions and steer them in directions that serve their needs. But silence? Silence is smooth, untouchable, sovereign. Niccolò Machiavelli wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But in the context of emotional boundaries, this transforms into something profound. It is better to be respected than needed, if you cannot be both. Your silence commands respect in ways your endless availability never could. When you stop rushing to fill every uncomfortable pause with reassurance, when you stop explaining your decisions to people who wouldn't respect them anyway, when you stop defending your right to have boundaries, you step into a different kind of power, the power of the unmoved. Think about water for a moment. Water doesn't argue with the rocks that try to redirect its flow. It simply finds another way or waits until the obstacle wears down. Your silence is like water. It doesn't fight. It doesn't explain. It simply is. And in that being, there's a force that's impossible to manipulate or control. People will try to fill your silence with their assumptions, their projections, their fears. They'll accuse you of being cold, distant, uncaring. Let them. Their discomfort with your silence reveals more about their need to control you than it does about your character. The silence gives you space to observe rather than react. In that observation, you begin to see patterns you missed when you are busy responding to every emotional demand. You see how they escalate when you don't immediately soothe. You see how they manufacture crises when life gets too peaceful. You see how they've learned to use your empathy as a weapon against your peace. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back to them their own emotional responsibility. Without your immediate response, they're forced to sit with their feelings, to find their own solutions, to develop the emotional muscles they've let atrophy while you carried their weight. The hardest part of stepping back isn't dealing with their reactions, it's dealing with your own. When you stop being the perpetual helper, the always available friend, the emotional fixing machine, you face an identity crisis that can feel like death itself. Who are you if you're not needed? What is your worth if it's not measured by your utility to others? These questions will haunt your quiet moments whispering that you're being selfish, that you're abandoning people who depend on you, that you're becoming the very thing you've always feared, unavailable. This collapse is necessary. This death of the false self, the persona built on pleasing others, is the doorway to authentic existence. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the psychological birth of the true self from the ashes of who others needed you to be. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, Jung wrote. But becoming who you truly are requires letting go of who you think you need to be for others to love you. It requires facing the terrifying possibility that some people won't like the authentic you as much as they liked the available you. The old identity dies hard. It will try to seduce you back with guilt, with the fear of abandonment, with the false sense of purpose that came from being indispensable. It will remind you of all the people who need you, all the crises you could prevent if you just went back to being who you were. But here's what the old identity won't tell you. It was built on borrowed worth. Every time you derived your value from being needed, you were essentially saying that you weren't enough just as you are. You were enough only when you were useful, only when you were solving someone else's problems, only when you were sacrificing your peace for their comfort. The collapse feels like loneliness because, for the first time in years, you're alone with yourself. Not the frantic, distracted self that was always responding to someone else's emotional weather, but the quiet, deep self that has been waiting patiently beneath all the noise for you to come home. This is where the real work begins. In the silence of your own company, you must learn to find value that doesn't depend on external validation. You must discover interests, passions, and dreams that exist independent of your role in other people's stories. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with evolving beyond the person others need you to be. It's the loneliness of the mountain peak, of the eagle that soars alone, not from isolation, but from the recognition that few can breathe at such heights. Nietzsche spoke of the Bermensch, not a superior human in the way most people misunderstand it, but an evolved consciousness that has transcended the need for constant external validation. When you stop being available to everyone, you enter into a kind of solitude that most people will never understand, the solitude of sovereignty. This isn't the bitter loneliness of rejection or the empty loneliness of disconnection. This is the sacred solitude of someone who has remembered their own company is worth keeping. You begin to discover that the person you are when no one is watching, when no one needs anything from you, when you're simply existing in your own presence, this person is fascinating, complex, worthy of love. The world will try to shame you for this solitude. They'll call it selfishness, isolation, coldness. They'll send messengers, mutual friends, family members, guilt-inducing messages to try to lure you back into the familiar prison of perpetual availability. They'll promise that things will be different this time, that they'll respect your boundaries, that they won't take advantage of your kindness. But you'll know better now. You'll recognize these attempts for what they are, the desperate reaching of people who have become addicted to your emotional labor and are experiencing withdrawal from your absence. In your solitude, you discover interests you forgot you had. You remember dreams that got buried under everyone else's emergencies. You find peace in simple moments, a cup of tea without being interrupted, a walk without having to console someone, an evening without having to manage someone else's emotions. This solitude teaches you something revolutionary. You are complete without their need for you. Your worth doesn't diminish when you're not being useful to someone else. Your value doesn't evaporate when you're not solving problems or providing comfort. Like a lion walking away from the herd, not in defeat, but in awakening you, discover that the strongest among us often walk alone. Not because they're incapable of connection, but because they refuse to accept connection that requires them to betray themselves. The solitude becomes a sanctuary, a place where you can hear your own thoughts without the constant static of other people's emotional broadcasts. In this sanctuary, you begin to build a life that reflects your authentic desires rather than your perceived obligations. Segment 7. Breaking the emotional contracts. For years, you've been operating under invisible contracts, unspoken agreements that bound you to emotional servitude. The contract reads something like this: I will be who you need me to be, available when you need me to be available, and I will absorb your pain so that you never have to sit with the discomfort of your own emotions. In exchange, you will not abandon me. But these contracts were written in disappearing ink. The moment you stopped fulfilling your end, the moment you became unavailable, set boundaries, or prioritized your own needs, they were quick to renegotiate the terms or break the agreement entirely. Breaking these emotional contracts is an act of revolution. It's declaring that your emotional energy is not a renewable resource to be endlessly harvested by others. It's recognizing that relationships built on your perpetual availability are relationships built on shifting sand. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." For too long, these unconscious contracts have directed your life. You've called it love, loyalty, friendship, but really, you've been living out patterns of codependency that masqueraded as virtue. The breaking is messy. People who benefited from these contracts will resist their dissolution. They'll try guilt, anger, manipulation, promises of change, anything to restore the familiar dynamic where your emotional availability served their comfort. But emotional manipulation thrives on predictability. When you stop being predictable, when they can no longer count on you to absorb their chaos, solve their problems, or provide unlimited comfort, the manipulation loses its power. You begin to see how many of your relationships were built on these contracts rather than genuine connection. The people who disappear when you're no longer endlessly available were never really there for you. They were there for what you provided. The relationships that survive your withdrawal, that adapt to your new boundaries, that respect your need for emotional space, these are the relationships worth keeping. Breaking the contracts means accepting that some people will leave. It means facing the possibility that your circle will shrink, that holidays might be quieter, that your phone will ring less often. But what you lose in quantity, you gain in quality. What you lose in convenience, you gain in authenticity. The contracts kept you small, kept you in service to others' comfort rather than your own growth. Breaking them is scary because it means stepping into an unknown version of yourself, one that exists independently of others' needs, one that can say no without guilt, one that can be unavailable without apologizing. Segment 8. Rebirth from the silence. Something beautiful happens in the space you create when you stop being available to everyone else. You become available to yourself. For the first time in years, maybe decades, you're not running from crisis to crisis, from need to need, from someone else's emergency to their next emotional catastrophe. You're sitting still in your own life, breathing your own air, listening to your own heartbeat. This is rebirth. Not the dramatic Hollywood version of transformation, but the quiet, profound awakening that comes when you stop betraying yourself for the comfort of others. You begin to reclaim the energy you've been pouring into other people's lives and pour it back into your own. The world doesn't end when you become unavailable. It begins. Your world begins. The version of reality where your needs matter, where your peace is protected, where your emotional energy is treated as the precious resource it has always been. People will adjust to your new boundaries in one of two ways. They'll respect them and find ways to connect with you that don't require your endless availability. Or they'll reveal that their connection to you was always contingent on your servitude. Both outcomes are gifts. One shows you who deserves a place in your life. The other shows you who never truly did. Your nervous system begins to regulate. The constant state of hypervigilance, always waiting for the next person who needs you, always scanning for the next emotional emergency, starts to fade. You remember what it feels like to wake up and wonder what you want to do with your day, rather than who needs you to fix their life. The rebirth brings with it a different kind of love, not the desperate, clinging love of someone who needs to be needed, but the sovereign love of someone who chooses connection from wholeness rather than emptiness. You love people not because you need their need for you, but because you genuinely enjoy their presence in your life. Your relationships change. The ones that survive become deeper, more authentic, more reciprocal. The ones that don't survive weren't really relationships at all. They were arrangements of convenience disguised as connection. You discover that the very thing you feared most, that no one would love you if you weren't always available, was the very thing keeping you from experiencing real love. Real love doesn't require you to be endlessly accessible. Real love sees your boundaries as self-respect, not selfishness. Who are you when no one is watching? You're beginning to find out, and the discovery is magnificent. You're complex, interesting, deserving of the same care you've been giving everyone else. You have dreams that don't involve fixing anyone, desires that don't center on someone else's needs, thoughts that exist independent of other people's problems. What part of you is waiting to be heard beneath the noise? It's the part that has been whispering for years that you deserve better, that you're worth more than your utility to others, that your peace matters as much as their comfort. It's getting louder now, isn't it? What would happen if you finally chose yourself fully? You're about to find out. And your world is holding its breath in anticipation of who you're becoming when you stop being who everyone else needs you to be. The silence isn't empty. It's full of possibility. Full of you